Час панелі настав, тому будемо.
Well, it's time to start the panel. My name is Zoya Lytvyn. I'm head of the OSVITORIA, a public organization, and we are developing human capital through education in Ukraine. We have a great team to talk about the human capital. Demographic challenges are unprecedented. While we don't have a relevant experience that we can count on internationally, but there's a clear understanding that we need to act right now on the governmental level and specific companies. This is what we're going to talk about. In our team, we have Roman Bondar, senior partner and a leader of Korn office in Ukraine. Also, we have Yevhen Liashchenko, chairman of the board, Ukrzaliznytsia. I found out that's the biggest employer of Ukraine. And also we have Phillip, a leader of Akholi company, and is a futurologist and analytic specialist in labor capital. And Roman, I guess we'll start with you. And the question I would like to address you, the first question: what do we know about our human capital right now? Because the situation since the full-scale invasion is changing dramatically all the time, and we lack decision to turn this information into some high-quality management analytics. But you are the advisor to lots of companies, lots of employers. What do we have here? Well, I'm not an optimist, so sorry for that. Sorry for my pessimism. Because the problem is bigger than we think. And we're always focusing on the war and the victory, which is also important. But all this rhetoric about restoration is impossible without talking about the future of the human capital. But the situation is horrifying. Again, as you rightly said, we don't have legitimate figures. These figures are fluctuating. Nobody will tell you how many people stayed in Ukraine because we didn't have a survey or something. Nevertheless, numbers produced by UN, European Union, and also governmental services, they have a very large fluctuation. Some people say 12 million, some people say 6. State Border Guard Service says it's 2.9, but what's important, if we look at the formal statistics, let's take official figures from State Border Guard Service. It's not important how many people left, it's the structure that's important, because 50% of these people are children. These are smaller children, younger children, and children of younger labor age. And also we have a gap in birth statistics since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now we have another gap, juvenile gap, that will bite us in 70 years. The second problem is amount of people that can work. Now we have only 12 million people like that. Of course, I'm including people who has injuries because of the war. Some people are on the front line, but 40% losses for such category. It creates a strategic problem for us that will remind about itself. Because the businesses, they're trying to shrink their budget, they're trying to optimize. So what are you going to build upon? The third problem is regional and sub-regional migrations. And Chesna organization did a research, and millions of people relocated from the east to the west. Of course, you can say that Ukrainians have links to the family, and we like to settle and the people will get back. What if not? What if security and safety will play a very important role in the future? And we see how foreign companies that would like to deploy their businesses in Ukraine, they're looking at Western Ukraine because of the proximity to the European market and the safety, and more people are there. And it's going to create a tectonic economical shift, and we have to consider that in our strategies. You probably heard Budanov's interview. Congratulations, we have a shift in narratives. Now we're officially talking about the war lasting until 2025. That means that we need to focus on the marathon. And our men are always drafted. And we have veterans. We have Volodymyr Statics. He's an advisor of the first prime minister. If you want to talk to him about these challenges for economy, you can do that. Because our heroes, our veterans that will get back to business, they need a very specific approach. We need to help them restore and get back on the track. Because of the attitude that they get when they return from the front line. If you try to analyze that and put it in the equation, I don't see any easy way out. We have to talk about migration. We can't do without it. And it's interesting for me to listen to Phillip. Yeah, Phillip is here. Again, he will be more optimistic today. But before we get to Phillip, I just want to give you an illustration. Some slides from my Work UA, our partner, some assessment of the labor market. So it's on the screen. So the first slide shows how since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, it dropped 10 times. So we had 9.6 thousand vacancies. Now it was restored to the pre-war period. The second slide is about the relocation of human capital. And of course, Transcarpathia, Ivano-Frankivsk, Khmelnytska, and Chernivtska Oblast are the leaders. At the same time, Transcarpathia Oblast is a leader in vacancies, while they have a lot of relocated people there. And also competition. It's very pessimistic, since it takes more time to find qualified specialists. Number of feedbacks, the responses to vacancy announcement is dropping. By the way, if you need translation, you can get some headsets.
So we have a huge challenges with our human capital. And other countries received not only refugees, they received this human capital, and they changed their narrative also about our people. For example, Polish experts declared that Ukrainian displaced people already paid 2 billion taxes. Or if we speak about Germany, they want to leave our people there. They create strategies on a government level, how they will include Ukrainian workforce on a national level. You worked with challenging cases. You consult governments. What is your perspective on Ukrainian situations, and do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I've got a lot. So first off, I'm a believer in being honest about what we're facing. So I am optimistic that there are some solutions, but I can't possibly emphasize enough the challenges that we are facing. So, Roman talked about this, and he rightfully did. We're looking at unknowns. We've got millions of people that left Ukraine. There are no comparative models for repatriation of these people. The one that keeps throwing around all the time, that people keep talking about, is 30%. That we expect 30% of people that have left to come back. But that's using a Balkan model that does not apply. So if we look at the Balkans during the wars, the different fights and things from 1991 to 2001, we had unemployment crisis inside of Europe. We had Spain that spiked and had a 22% unemployment in the middle of that. Germany was pushing 10% unemployment, these types of things. And all the governments in the region, Western Europe, were intentionally trying to push out foreign workers so they could create jobs for people domestically. And that just simply isn't the case anymore. So as much as I like to give Korn Ferry a hard time, being an exec with a competitor, the Korn Ferry does have a study that came out a while back, and I keep citing this, that we're facing right now a shortage of 85 million skilled workers by 2030. So that report has come out a while ago. If we look at Boston Consulting Group, their data says that it's looking at about $10 trillion in lost revenues by 2030. They've already come out and said that in 2022, we've lost over $2 trillion in revenue because people can't find the work. They can't find people to work. I was an exec with Manpower Group, and I set up the team that actually is sucking out Ukrainians now. So I apologize. We'll call this atoning for my sins previously. But even the studies and things that I did back with Manpower Group are showing that we're heading into a complete new world. It's an unprecedented skilled talent shortage. We just have never dealt with this. So just give an example of what we're dealing with right now. Globally, people are talking about the potential of a recession. It's economic uncertainty. We're coming off of incredible inflation, coming out of COVID. And yet we still are looking at unemployment numbers that we cannot fathom. We could not predict this. You're looking at Czech Republic of an unemployment number of last year, 2022, of something like 2.34%. Poland is at 2.6%, and Germany is at 2.9%. Even the United States right now, we're looking at 3.6%, these types of numbers. It's absolutely incredible. We're looking at a situation right now where Germany alone is forecasting a need for 7 million additional people in the coming years. So already, even after they've absorbed the Ukrainians that have come in already, they're looking at mechanisms in which to import 400,000 people every year for the next 15 years. So we're looking at this scenario right now where the top asset in the world, the most valuable asset, the biggest growth opportunity is people. You go back to the Korn Ferry report, 85 million people translates to $8.5 trillion in revenues. That's twice the size of the entire energy industry. So you think about that. If there's an asset out there that's worth trillions of dollars, oil, somebody finds a new oil patch or a new deposit, how much of a fight is there going to be to go develop that asset? And we put that in perspective right now, we've got an opportunity for 8.5 trillion in developing talent, 85 million people. And right now, you've got countries and companies around the world that are looking at Ukraine as the largest oil patch, the largest oil reserve, so to speak, in human capital in the world. You've got everybody that's intentionally targeting Ukraine right now, trying to suck that out. And the scary part about this, there's nobody at the wheel right now that's doing any preventive efforts at all. We have nobody right now that's working to save this. I'll just make one point about that. I was a senior exec with Manpower Group. It's one of the largest staffing and recruiting companies in the world, a bit of a competitor to Korn Ferry. Manpower Group, Deco and Randstad announced the largest Ukrainian workforce development job creation program in Ukraine's history. That happened several weeks ago. They announced that they're going to help facilitate 250,000 jobs in 2024 alone. It's absolutely incredible. There's two problems with it. Number one, it's people outside of Ukraine. Those 250,000 jobs will be outside of Ukraine. Second problem is that nobody from the Ukrainian government, nobody from Ukraine was involved in those conversations leading up to the announcement at all. We're asleep. If we want to win this war, little war against the economy and the workforce, we've got to get in. We've got to get into this game. We can't wait anymore.
Isn't it sad that in 21st century, while countries and companies fight for the brains and talents, some countries still fight for the territory? В той час, коли боротьба за таланти – це те, що відбувається в цивілізованому світі, дехто воює за територію. Євгена, ми говорили про український контекст.
Eugene, we talked about Ukrainian context and stats and world trends, and your example of a real Ukrainian business, one of the greatest employee in Ukraine that copes with the trends, copes with the situation, works with crisis management 24/7. Can you please share how the full-scale invasion, full-scale wars changed your structure, what are the greatest challenges, and how do you cope with them in terms of human capital management? Well, first of all, I want to be an optimist, really, but it's important for me to stay realistic. You need to understand what are the problems. In reality, understand the reserves and capabilities that we have. Well, there are 2 or 3 things that I can pinpoint as problems in terms of human capital. First, demographic pressure. But it's different for a company that has offices all over Ukraine. It's different from region to region. So there are different approaches to cope with that. The second thing is the greatest financial pressure. Unfortunately, Ukrzaliznytsia still not very efficient if you compare it with European railway networks. It's absolutely different. It's a lot less than for European countries. In what sense? Efficiency, use of professions, mechanization, and the third thing that's also very important. We have lots of people, but still we lack capital, because if you look at the critical professions, we lack 30%, for some of them it's even 50%. So that's a very strange situation. On the one hand, we need to switch to having less people, and we have to decrease the pressure, because now 50% of cost is a cost for personnel, for human capital.
Can you give us the number? How many people have an Ukrzaliznytsia as employees and the affiliates? Okay, so 190,000, 5.5 in like the affiliates. So yeah, those actually working, like 220,000 for the staff, for the general staff, but many like already left, or some of them temporarily dismissed. So first, demographical pressure is there, and second thing, financial pressure, and we have to do something with that. Third thing, despite the financial pressure, so the wage level, unfortunately, like 14.5 thousand hryvnias average wage right now, when in Ukraine we have the average of 18, so still it's not very competitive. If we speak about those highly specialized professions, like the plumbers, maybe energy sector specialists, people who are important for Ukrzaliznytsia, approximately like 85,000 of these specialized professions and jobs. At any price, we simply have to keep them in the company, and also to find some reserve as well. These professions are even more underpaid. So 3 problems that we do have. Can we clarify what Roman mentioned? The human capital flows. You work all around the country. Do you feel that your people were like shifting to Western regions? Yeah, we did. Of course, we had that feeling. But even during the first weeks of full-scale war, we controlled that flow. We did that. If we speak not only about the problems but solutions, so one of these solutions internally, that was internal recruiting, when we used a single approach. When people in those regions which were under temporary occupation, or where the hostilities took place, or where they couldn't simply perform some operations, these people, we registered them. We created an internal list for employment, and we did not take people from the outside, let's say, and we sent them to other regions. So when there were vacancies, so we used the internal capital that we had eventually, and We didn't stop at this because it was really some hard time that we had. Secondly, we with a list of these specialized professions and jobs, we had the qualification list, and we launched a process of retraining and requalification, even for those people who were like 100% of the vacancy, but this was our internal capital. These people in centralized manner, we sent them to training, and we gave them a broader list of vacancies inside the company. So this was an opportunity to close critical gaps that we had with highly specialized vacancies. I'm so happy that apart from all that pessimism and horrible statistics, we still have some success stories, and these can be used as lessons learned for SMEs and for big businesses. Okay, may I just add a little bit more? Another story, just we have to separate. The operational personnel, which is the core of the company of Ukrzaliznytsia, and non-profile professions or administrative personnel, we have to distinguish because during the first 2 weeks, we revised the processes, various administrative activities and algorithms. At first, we cut the administrative staff for 40%, then raised to -30%, but still. We cut the administrative staff for like at least 30%. All right, thank you. And Roman can actually correct me, but I do know that the biggest pain of Ukrainian business today is the working hands, the operational personnel. White collars are working in remote manner, in remote format, staying elsewhere in the world. Those who are actually creating national products for years, huge lack of these, and we have these shifts inside the country. Okay, we have a chance to ask questions from the hall using the application of our forum. Okay, open the application, address your questions. When we finish with mine, we'll come to you. Okay, Roman. I want to be very simple with my question. Okay, so with all those challenges mentioned by you and Phillip, we have to somehow stabilize and retain the human capital today because we have businesses, those still operational. What Ukrainian companies should do today to retain and restore the human capital? Okay, Zoya, the key phrase, the key statement, retaining. Because we have to understand that now we have very interesting analytics. We can see really small progress, turnover progress. As for the war in banking and other sectors, banks really have very good track right now. Industry, especially those companies close to frontline, other dynamics. But the other indicator, apart from this turnover and fluidity, what is the depth and the length of recruiting funnel? What companies are facing when they engage people? So we can see the growth, what colleagues showed on the graph. It's so hard today just to drag people to the company. And let's say there are no problems with white collars, let's say, because COVID taught us to work remotely. If a company has mature processes and culture of management, proper mechanisms of decision making and taking care of people, if the managers are trained to manage in a remote manner, finding a Ukrainian in Netherlands or France who will work in the service administrative functions, that's okay. You can. The main problem is that many Ukrainian general directors and CEOs and owners, they don't want to have this hybrid format because they don't know how to manage people. They have to get the physical presence. I want you to raise your hands, those in your companies. Which of you has this legitimized hybrid format of work which is allowed the remote work? Which of you do have that? I expected less. Okay, but that's good. That's I'm praising the forum. We have very, very progressive audience here. So mostly local companies are not ready to go in this direction. For them, this is destructive. For them, this is no advantage. They think that this is not an advantage. What was Yevhen mentioning with the basic operational professions? The closer to front line, the bigger is the catastrophe. Yes, it causes the pressure on the management of businesses. They are under pressure to make more lean and flatten the organizational structures, to raise the productivity, but mostly it requires investment. Ask Yevhen, can he dismiss 60 or 70,000 people and improve effectiveness? He says yes. He may say yes, but he needs $50-70 million for it to automatize the spots and functional blocks. The problem that we will have in the following years, the agenda of the CEOs and owners, they have to optimize and look for internal resource. This will be the priority. The other story, we already had problems with education before the full-scale war. The quality, especially of vocational, of TVT, that was horrible. Now, when our kids and those students who already have to graduate, when they leave the country or when they left the country because they don't want to go to army, boys just don't, because they say, we don't want to be there, So we will have this battle right now for young talents and for young people who need to fill your lower strata in your organizations. Do you have a strategy on engaging these people? Who will win in this battle? And we can see, by the way, a very interesting trend, we observe it. The companies with powerful brand, which is saturated with this engagement, especially companies helping the military, helping the armed forces, the state in this difficult battle against Russia, they have an advantage because people respond to their vacancies. They want to go there because they want actually to have this like mission. When you talk to a cool company like Interpipe, they say, Roman, we don't have problems, it's fine. We have huge amount of response. Talking to regional company, they say, we can't even find drivers. Like, this is a problem. Just to add, it's a tragedy when we speak about the award equilibrium. Nobody knows how much should you pay for a talent? What should be the reward? You can't be effective because of this. If your business is not expert-oriented, if you don't get, like, dollars for your product, you struggle all the time for the production cost. People are important there. You can't be competitive and fight for talents. You have to create comprehensive strategies. Please, amply valid proposition, what that is. Remember, total reward strategy. Apart from the money, you create non-material motivation. Just to finish, the education is dysfunctional. We have a problem with basic core jobs and professions. Every company who wants to have a future must create one's own learning academies, one's own educational centers to reproduce experience and expertise. If you don't have money, the experts councils, internal clubs where they can share this expertise. But if you don't reproduce the professionals, you can't get enough of resource when we'll have the growth stage and recovery, and you won't have people there. Whoa, that was harsh. Okay, so first, effective remote work. Okay, managers to be trained and the team for these jobs and occupations to invest in the training. Okay, senses and value proposition, why people have to come to you. And this is not just about the mission of the company, it's also about the war. Create a brand like Novopecherska, like Oko and other companies, MHP. Okay, third, education for retraining and requalification, advanced training. Grow your experts internally, step by step, also fair rewards. Money is important. Your employees have kids, have families, have grandmas in Europe. They spend dollars there in euros. They are ready to be patient, but okay. If Ella Libanova joined us today, she would say that times when we talk that our human capital is cheaper than in Europe, these times are gone because of the war. And not all in the hall raised their hands. Yeah, digital and remote was not very... Okay, which of the companies are the benchmarks we can actually work with? Okay, the banks, they demonstrate like the miracle of digitization. Look at Raiffeisen, look BNP Paribas, Krasibank, what are doing. Banks are actually taking new standards right now. So, Digitization is not just implementing an ERP. It's about effective work with human capital. That's why this would be the homework.
We've heard local perspective, and you have the international one. What are your recommendations for Ukrainian companies and for the government in terms of keeping our human capital and bringing people back, if that's possible?
Definitely. Yeah. So one, I just a little history. I've been coming and doing things with Ukraine for almost 20 years now. I'm here because I believe in Ukraine. So if we go back to that 85 million person shortage that was citing Korn Ferry with, part of it's demographic. There's no way around it. We've got aging populations in major employment centers like Germany, United States, Canada, and others. But the other big driver here is that we are going through a massive change in the way we work. It's people call this, the fourth industrial revolution. It's the rise of AI, automation, robotics, IoT, these types of things. And it's going to have an absolutely profound impact on our workforce. And so one thing that we just have not been talking about in any of the forums today that should be addressed in next year's is that we could be looking at a 40% offset or reduction of existing jobs being replaced by new jobs. That's an absolutely spooky proposition. But just keep in mind this, that already we've got robots, agricultural robots, that are more cost effective than manual labor in Africa. That's a fact. This is happening now. We've already got IBM that's decided to offset up to 8,000 to 10,000 jobs with artificial intelligence. That happened this year. So we've got this spooky thing. At the same time, these technologies will create completely new jobs that are more high value. They require a far more educated workforce, a lot more STEM-centric, these types of things. And I've spent a lot of time modeling this out. And the reality is that Ukraine is positioned to be potentially, if we ignore the war, this is one of the other unfortunate side effects of the war, is that if we just ignore the war and we look at this scenario where Ukraine has this fresh start without these challenges, Ukraine, the education system, the history of STEM, the history of pursuing tertiary education is such that it makes it very, very very easy compared to other countries to go after that new workforce. Now, we've got to do it. The challenge, though, is you can't do it by yourself. There's no way. I mean, I'm an MIT guy, and I keep citing this example left and right, but MIT has an artificial intelligence lab that's funded and built by IBM. It's the IBM Watson lab at MIT. And openly, IBM and MIT cite that this lab would be obsolete the moment that IBM jumps out. So if MIT cannot provide a current AI curriculum and these future skills, how can we without these types of companies? And that gets into the recommendation. We've got to get in this game. I think that just kind of an analogy, let's say that we're in a FIFA World Cup final game, we're down 2 minutes or so left in time, and we're down by a point. One strategy is just have everybody go out on the field and hustle as fast as they can, just, run around in circles, do whatever they think is best. The other one is we take a moment, and we come together and we work as a team through a set plan. One works, one doesn't. And right now, we're chaos. So we've got to change this. The first thing that we need to do, and this should have actually been done last year, is we have got to come up with an interagency cohesive team that is immediately addressing workforce challenges. Okay? We need to then go off and identify the strategic industries that will be involved in reconstruction. By the way, we can't solve all problems for everybody. By the way, we're not getting everybody to come back to Ukraine. We're not going to keep everybody in Ukraine. We're not going to save everything here, but there are things we can do. So it's time for us to tighten that circle, get very, very focused on what we do. So let's create that organization. Let's identify key strategic industries we know are going to be needed to keep the country running and rebuild the country. Okay? Transportation is an example, but construction, agriculture, energy. Like D-Tech has great ideas about this, but they can't get the people. Okay? So let's identify a very focused group of what we need to do. Next thing we need to do is we have got to go out and reach out to the international companies and domestic companies that are involved in this. For example, if we talk agriculture, we have to get BASF and Bayer and Microsoft and John Deere, these other major employers that have an interest in rebuilding Ukrainian agriculture to start working with us right now. This has got to happen. Next up is that team has to start identifying the skills that are high value. Again, we can't address everything. So let's use this group, domestic employers, international employers, to prioritize the skills that we need that are going to be high value that we can produce inside of Ukraine, and away we go. And then we identify those that will be the secondary stuff. And then we put together a controlled mechanism to handle immigration, landed resources, and things to build up the country as we go forward. Okay? But when we start identifying those primary resources, that primary workforce we have to develop, again, it has to be collaborative development, has to be high value, has to be something that not only just rebuilds Ukraine, but helps Ukraine become the really economic and technologically dominant that it should be. We have to do this. There's no other way. Actually, we should have been starting this a year ago. There's no excuse for not having it up and running right now.
So it's synchronization of the stakeholders, prioritization of
Yep.
key tasks, priorities,
Yep.
and collaboration,
Yep.
government and business and international players.
We have to, exactly. And it's got to happen right now. We've got to
We
take
love
this seriously and get
your
running.
ambition and positivity.
Well, that can happen.
Thank you for being in our panel. Друзі, я
Okay, friends, I remind you that via the app you can ask questions and we'll go to them later. Yevhen, a question to you. In your last answer, you told us about the biggest challenges. You mentioned how Ukrzaliznytsia is solving those problems. I want to concentrate on one of them, maybe to add. So, adapting and integrating our veterans, those people who return from the front line, because Roman mentioned that as well, and basically all the demographic experts say, and analysts, this is a big share of human capital we have to rely on in future. We have to retrain them. We'll have to integrate them. Okay, if I just draw the line on the solutions that we do consider, first, for people at their workplaces to give maximum economic effect. If this is the philosophy of the company, then it drags the methodology, and education should be there, and internal recruiting, mixed occupations and so on. So if we speak about education, first of all, the dual education. For industrial occupations, we need to change it to cover the gaps. So second thing, 100% guarantee that where we have the vacancy, the workplace, it will be retained, especially for small villages, small towns. For example, in some places, Ukrzaliznytsia is the only employer. If we go to veterans, the first and second is important because all respondents, and I was talking to people, one of the top concerns of the veterans is the risk to return and not to find a job, or even not to have a chance to go back to your workplace. Many others, but this concern is really painful. This is something that they speak about. And we started working with veterans as social project.
In order to adapt them, because it should be a philosophy of the company. It's not an easy process. It's hard to do, but it's possible. And we are doing good progress. But there's a different thing. It's a classical win-win situation where veterans, we understand that this is one of the most specific and concrete resources, demographic resources. These are the people are not going anywhere. They are very motivated. These people change their mindset. It's very important for them not just to be there, but to change the environment around them. And we are adapting to that. And personally, for me in my company, we are working on making sure so that the veterans not just get back to their works. They should be able to find other jobs, and we also count on them as a very specific demographic resource. This is why we want to retain them, not just because we have a requirement, but because we need them. At the same time, there should be processes to ensure that when these people get back from the front line, we are creating veteran communities and teams. They help us locally on the ground to solve our problems. Also, they can help their brothers in arms very efficiently to make sure they assimilate and adapt. Because we all understand that, unfortunately, they don't just have physical problems. They have mental health problems as well. And 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation with veterans with disabilities, and they said that what was most challenging for our brothers in arms is not having psychologists in place, because we started earlier and we have a luxury to speak with therapists and people who get back from the front line now. They have huge problems with trauma, and we have to build relations with them to make sure they're not disappointed. I think we will focus on this topic on the next economic forum, the veteran inclusion. Two clarifying questions. You mentioned education, dual education. Do you have any partnership with educational institutions, or you just do it yourself? And the second question is about the adaptation of veterans. Did you have enough HR capacity that you had before it was necessary for you to change your structure, expand capacities? Well, we had a very expanded professional education system within our company, but now it's non-existent. We have some training facilities for train drivers, and now we are getting back to that, and we are counting on dual education. As far as partnership is concerned, lots of companies understand that it's very important to have their own training resource. Some companies support professional educational institutions, and the competition there is profound. So it's a big challenge for us, but we have experience, and we're trying to get back there. We're trying to restore this educational system within our company. Specifically talking about change in the company, any structured company, if we face challenges, if we don't change, we will never cope with the challenge. It's a great opportunity. We started working with veterans on the early stages, even before they are hired. We would like to make sure they get support. And we have lots of production facilities, like hundreds of them. It's very challenging. It's impossible to retrain everyone. So we created a process that supports veterans. If they need adaptation, they get it. If we need to adjust their workplace, they do that. If they need additional trainings for the team, they do that. If there are disabilities or injuries, they help them find another job or adjust their workplace to make sure that they can work. So there's a specific unit allocated for that. Yeah. I think there was a photo for a person from your team. Can you tell me the story behind this guy? It's a worker that was on the front line. He received an injury. Unfortunately, we have these medical commissions, and we're basically struggling with them. Fortunately, they allowed him to work. I mean, he can work on the spot, not remotely, because oftentimes they do that. So unfortunately, he can work in the facility. well, he couldn't get back to his previous job on the railway. So he was forced to change his workplace a little bit. So he works as an electrical engineer, and they're basically working at his area, at the facility, and they're bringing equipment to his workplace. But he's doing the job. That's very important. Roman, you wanted to add something? Yeah. I would like to say that not many people understand that veterans is something that will stay for a while, and our failures will bring great problems. Lots of people, 50%, they leave the company, and nobody knows how many veterans we're going to have. Maybe it's 1.4, 1.5 millions, but more drafting is ongoing. Even when they are demobilized, even if they approach your company, they will use this recruiting, marking, Raiffeisen, Novopecherska. These are the companies that you can learn a lot from. I have a question to the audience. Please raise your hand. Who has a chief veteran officer in your company, embedded in your company, in the business processes that help them? That's a horrible story right there, because even these problems with veterans, they're not even on the radar. And if we fail with that, veterans that leave, that quit under stress, they have drinking problem, they have problems with crime, drug problem, and you will face total destruction of your economic climate. And this problem is not just a problem for local communities. It's your problem that you're going to face. And Yevhen can comment on that. It should be on the radar, not just for the CEO, but the supervisory boards as well. I'll just add, if I may. When I talk to veterans, well, sometimes they embrace things and they can listen to you, but they are more inclined to listen to their brothers in arms. So we need to integrate lots of them. They are different. And we need to attract people that understand the problem so that they can create teams within the companies and they can help companies to work with these cases. Because they have a zero tolerance for people speaking dumb things or tyranny, but they really respect each other and they can be on the same page with each other all the time. So ideally, veteran chief officer should be a veteran, and that would be the right strategy. Not necessarily. I mean, if you think about it, this should be a diverse system. It should be a combined system. Well, who plays that role is a different question, but it should be combined. Well, since there was only one person who raised a hand, that's some homework to do. We should have more of people like that, and I guess we will need to create a topic of veteran inclusion for the next forum meeting. And another question I can't help but ask about human capital. The numbers, because lots of economists say that after the stabilization, to make sure that Ukraine can restore, we need minimum 4 million 4 million people. And the problems that Phillip talked about are different. Who can be that capital? If not Ukrainians, who can be these people that are going to get back or going to invite. I mean, what do we need to do now as businesses to be prepared for that?
Yeah, I'm passionate about this topic too. So.
Питання до всіх, хто хоче дати.
That's a question for everyone, actually.
Too. We know there's going to be huge international involvement in reconstruction of Ukraine. We're also looking at major Ukrainian companies involved as well. Modeling out the exact numbers of people we need to rebuild, it's almost impossible. When I go through one, and I'm estimating it out, it's between 3 to 6 million, somewhere in that range. So 4 million fits in that. That's more than what we have. And we already know, for example, Unit City development was slowed before the war because they couldn't find people. You get the entire Novopecherska, Lipki, buildings and things all over the place that are just being slow because they didn't have people to work. That problem is going to be confounded, and it's going to be multiplied massively. And so we've got to get back into that entire point that I was making before. We have to have that team now working with everybody. Identify the resources we're going to source and develop domestically versus those that we're going to import. There's no way around it. There's going to be importation of talent to rebuild Ukraine. Even if we were to bring everybody back, everybody that's left, we're still going to need to import talent because the amount of money that's coming in, it's an unnatural economic cycle. And
Which talents? Where do we bring them from?
Well, that's the problem.
Звідки прийдуть ці таланти?
That's the problem. So we're looking at scenarios right now that just aren't necessarily great. We're looking at talent availability, from markets like Indonesia, Pakistan, and others. And we've got to, anytime you mix cultures and people and things, it's big challenges. So we have to have a function now that's intentionally defining what's going to take place. Because if we don't have that in place now, we'll be on the receiving end. You have major international companies that are just dictating what's taking place, and the amount of money and stuff that's coming in, we'll receive it. We'll do whatever they say. We got to get on top of it. Again, we got to figure out what we're going to be producing domestically. We have to start working with these big international companies now to put together places for smart immigration, or else it's going to be a complete fiasco.
Smart immigration. Подобається цей термін. Романе?
Я коротко скажу, що перед тим, як думати про те, як залучити людей, робочу силу в Україні, ми спочатку маємо...
Before thinking how to attract people to Ukraine, we need to think how not to lose people that are still here. Imagine if the war is over and we don't have any relocation restriction anymore. What do men do after that? They will just leave the country. So this is a matter of migration policy. I think during the next forum we need to prioritize that for discussion, because Ukrainians is a pretty xenophobic nation. We don't really tolerate other countries, and we don't really tolerate each other. It's very specific. But how do we retain these people? How do we create a magnet for people and motivate them to stay? Maybe Yevhen has this ultimate answer. What can be the magnet? Well, there is no secret. But if we really need to attract other people, other nations systematically, we don't want them to become a separate nation within a nation. They should be integrated, because otherwise it can harm rather than tackle demographic problems. And we have a couple of big challenges. We need to resolve the problem with veterans, with the reintegration. Let's solve that before we switch to other challenges. And they need to understand that they are needed. And as far as Ukrzaliznytsia is concerned, we need to make sure that people in Ukrzaliznytsia, they feel they need it. If we bring people from the outside without providing internal people with the possibility to be promoted, that will destroy this system rather than fill in the gaps. Yeah, they should feel needed. Yevhen, and maybe it's a question for you, because for the rest of the question, in the feedback form, I got some answers, and you mentioned 14,000 hryvnias for salaries. Do you plan to increase salaries next year in your financial plan? Maybe there are some people from your team. Maybe there will be some people from the trade unions. Well, I think they've heard something that was said about Indonesia. Yeah, that's a strategic question right here. Because overall expenditures for the personnel, for the staff, is 50%, and yes, that's a very important thing. It's a big deal for the company. But the reason why I talked about privatization, about veterans, about prioritization, we need to focus. So in terms of focus, we have 90,000 people that are important, critical for Ukrzaliznytsia. So we want to raise their salaries first. And 3 months or 4 months ago, we launched a program. It's actually not a salary increase program, it's a bonus program for the amount of work they perform. The problem was not the low salary, the problem was not they didn't have enough job. They didn't have enough amount of work to be paid for. And well, recently we have increased the salary 30%. And for some jobs, like electricians, we raised their profits, not just the salary. I'm also talking about bonuses. It's very important for our partners to increase tariff as well. For me, the result is paramount. Motivation, it's about motivation. Thanks. This is why it's in the plan. We want to raise general salary 10%, but we will focus on the critical jobs. Yeah, I guess the person in the audience heard the answer. Well, on my side, I would like to talk about education as a motivation, because that's a very important demographic factor to be back, because people get back when they have universities and schools to put their children in, and this will give their possibility to find jobs around the world. And there's a demographic factor for birth, like giving birth to more children and kindergartens, of course, and this is a key tool to develop human capital within companies, countries, and cases that you talked about. So education to retain human capital. Thank you very much for that, for the conversation. I guess companies have heard about tools that they can use to retain their employees, to stabilize their company. Well, see you on the next forum.